The fabric of our design drives us to explore what is unknown, for purposes that may not be derived until the knowledge is gained. I consider myself to be an explorer and a conqueror. My expeditions are not that of land, governments, or any other physically known entity. I explore the infinities contained within the human psyche. A man blessed with the intellect and brilliance such as me need not to be weighed down by an outdated moral standard. So to some, my deeds are somewhat scoffed despite my results. I ask questions none others ask, and I seek answers none desire to seek. To the establishment, there are acceptable and unacceptable questions. In reality, there is no such barrier to be in existence. These diaries are for the sake of my experiments. None other can document my conclusions and answers as greatly as the one originally gifted. We will start from the beginning. May the establishment watch with antipathy. Perhaps they will not be so quick to judge. July 2nd, 2010. I have acquired a home for my experiments. It is newly constructed, in full isolation. The location will not be written here, as I feel anxiety towards those who I know watch me. What will take place behind these walls will be undeniable towards exploration. I will find answers the establishment never sought. I have so many questions. Where to begin being the first? July 3rd, 2010. I wonder if those who watch me know of the feats that I will bring to this world. It pleases me knowing that my intellect has been gifted to none other, despite all the mockery that I've received. An annoyance of sleepiness revealed to me goals for my first experiment. I began to document ideas with haste, constantly growing with excitement as to getting started. Thus begins my first question. What happens to man if they do not sleep? Will the constant stimulant replenish the energy that is needed? July 6th, 2010. With the design of my deserted home, I included piping that had no exit connections. This would allow me to test chemicals on subjects if the needs be in specific areas. The watchers are undoubtedly shaken by curiosity, unable to question the source to my experiment's end. I need a subject, not a volunteer. The world would never produce a volunteer. I need somebody who can be forgotten, somebody the world will not miss, assuming my results go awry from the benefit of the subject. July 8th, 2010. Driving into town, my state is blessed with wanderers. A simple promise of food, payment, and personal praise is all I needed to convince those detached from society. The time it took for me to find somebody was non-marginal. He mentioned to me that he is known as Chad. Irrelevant. July 9th, 2010. The subject Chad arrived to the experiment house. As soon as it walked in, the automation on the doors allowed them to close and lock. Thankfully, they were built for strength, with no one man being able to break out of the house. The subject tried, but he failed. It instead inflicted minor injuries upon itself through its vain attempts. I admit it was somewhat amusing to watch. Probably not towards the establishment who watch me, but as they are misguided, they would not understand. Using the installed surveillance equipment and the loudspeakers, I explained to the subject the next step. It had plenty of food rationed out for 2 weeks. A schedule for consumption including quantities was provided for the subject, thus to limit any confusion that the subject may experience. In addition, it was given a room upstairs just for itself with a bed, with all other upstairs rooms remaining empty. All available plumbing worked, and it had enough toiletries to last for 2 weeks, rationed similarly to the food. If it were to overuse what was rationed, I would provide more resources for it. There were books for entertainment, a book for a personal journal, and whatever belongings the subject brought to the house. The belongings were for the sake of a personal touch, as I did not wish the subject to feel that it is in a completely foreign environment. The subject just has to stay awake for 2 weeks. With the help of a focused stimulant being pumped into the house, the experiment began. July 13th, 2010. The delays in any type of response were frustrating. Like a child eager to explore the unknown, I anxiously awaited any type of result for 4 days. I wanted to prove to those fools who watched me that their standard was a misguided one. I would show them a kind of mentality from a different angle of view. I only write as today produced my first result. The subject started to become irritable at the smallest of things. Most notably, the subject tripped over a chair it left extended from a table earlier in the day. The chair is now in pieces on the kitchen floor. I found this fascinating, that instead of the subject succumbing to his fatigue, as it clearly showed difference in motor functions compared to the first day, the subject channeled an energy that could not have been present in its body. Perhaps the stimulant dose is too strong. I couldn't risk lowering at this point, due to the nature of the stimulant. The dose has to be precise to give the body the feel that it never needs to sleep, and that fatigue is a figment of the past. I had to continue. July 14th, 2010. The subject's bursts of energy are increasing. It almost seems as if it's not feeling pain where most creatures would from the situations that it's brought upon itself. It seemed the subject attempted to escape its confinement. Using its fingernails, the subject attempted to dig at an interior wall in one of the ground floor rooms. The wall has a sheet metal exterior, over attached drywall to typical wood framing. Despite this design, the subject intensified its efforts. Its suffering during this ordeal was apparent, with constant moans and wails as it increased its attempts to escape. It would hit the wall with its elbow, attempting to dent it, perhaps to cause a structural weakness. The subject would strike the wall in different areas by kicking, punching, or even using its head. As expected, the subject caused moderate injury to itself. The wall was stained with blood, as was the flooring and the complexion of the subject. Despite all of this, the subject did not give up. It was exhilarating to say the least. Despite its futile attempts, it continued to push towards a set goal that repeated endlessly in its inferior mind. Escape. July 18th, 2010. Yesterday the subject screamed for what was timed at 3 hours. It was constant, taking breaths when needed. Its screams were muffled by the raging thunderstorm overhead. Perhaps the outside noise irritated what its mind was used to, that being silence. It was fascinating to see, and a bit understandable. The subject was held in isolation for so long. Surely an outside source of noise would cause some type of irritation. The relevance this brings to my results are exemplary. May those who watch me in the shadows bask with curiosity, lacking any intelligence to record any data, much less be able to comprehend such genius. July 19th, 2010. The subject's voice has dissipated. Breathing seemed to be accompanied by a sort of wheeze. It seemed painful to the subject. Nonetheless, like all creatures, it clings to survival up until the last moment. For the subject, survival was dominant. Any definition of sanity by the subject, however, was not so dominant. I observed the subject keep to itself. It didn't move much, besides picking at the scabs that had formed around its fingers and head from the incident with the wall. They must have itched, causing it minor discomfort. As planned, I needed to introduce an environmental anomaly to my results. To the subject, it would be a chaotic anomaly to the subject's surroundings, and I would see everything. July 20th, 2010. I found a second subject, one who volunteered to help based on the assumption of assisting somebody disabled. His name was Jacob, and despite my explanation requiring his services, he took it as truth. It was the truth. Those who watch me should not judge. Such creatures will never understand the need of such an experiment. The benefit would be enormous. Bringing in Jacob to the house was a minor challenge. I needed to unlock an area of the house furthest away from the main subject. He entered the home with the door closing and locking behind him. Such an action startled Jacob, but he continued to move through the darkened house. Many of the lamps had been already destroyed by the subject, as light began to irritate his condition. I returned to my remote location, eager to observe the results of my introduction. July 21st, 2010. The subject for the first few hours ignored Jacob's presence. It never even recognized that there was a second entity in the room. It wasn't until the sun set the subject began to observe its surroundings. It noticed Jacob, beginning to observe him. Jacob tried to communicate, but the subject was either unable or unwilling to communicate with Jacob. Jacob showed great anxiety, noticing that he was unable to reach the subject. After a time, the subject began to move closer to Jacob. For a moment, it seemed that Jacob welcomed the subject's advancement. I found this curious, as the subject was a great danger to Jacob. The subject was at the point where pain was ignored or simply not felt. Any moral judgment was not questioned. Those types of judgments simply did not exist based on my observations thus far. My curiosity turned to great excitement as the subject jumped towards Jacob's position, knocking him onto the floor. The subject did not deviate from striking the subject over and over. Through the torn vocal cords, the subject's sounds were more of growls and gasps, shadowed by the overwhelming sounds of terror from Jacob. He screamed for help, only to be ignored for a much larger goal. I expressed a silent hope towards those who watched me in the shadows, towards their experience of exhilaration such as mine. I could not fathom having nothing more than this as a reaction, while witnessing such a drastic development. The subject at times would back away from Jacob, perhaps being startled by the screams emanating from him. It would observe Jacob calmly, completely the opposite of how it was previously reacting. Jacob would lay there moaning, completely disoriented. If Jacob seemed to recover at all, the subject would violently attack him again. Astounding. Eventually, Jacob stopped moving. Based purely on observation, he was alive. Due to him being silent, the subject simply observed him. Eventually, it left Jacob, and it moved to another room. July 22nd, 2010. I was excited to see the next turn of events after last night's exhilarating developments. Jacob may have learned not to move, and to simply reside there. If he had any form of intelligence, he would. However, the turnout was much different than I had expected. The subject killed Jacob, decapitating him after Jacob had died. What was interesting was the subject's behavior after the decapitation. It took Jacob's severed head and kept the head close. The subject cradled the head, as a child would with a stuffed animal. The subject would rather have Jacob be inanimate, taking the most distinguished feature of Jacob and keeping it for itself. What a remarkable feat. The subject had encompassed all animal instincts that are within the basis of human evolution. It is savage, instinctive, and direct with its approach. May those in the establishment who spy on my work see this feat, and come to their own conclusions. They'll bask in what I've seen, and what I've documented. I release him tomorrow. Another degenerate among society. But what I have brings some worth to this lost creature. July 23rd, 2010. Today is the day. The subject will be released and I will have my results. Surely those who watch me can feel the anticipation emanating off my presence. I write this in the morning, before returning to the subject home. May my conclusion be written, and my results shake what the world knows of us as species. I return to the home. There is nothing left. It has been completely destroyed. I stood outside the house in shock, looking at the ashes that had become my perfect testing grounds. So many subjects were to be used in this building. My results would enrich man's understanding, while putting the establishment to shame. It's all gone, engulfed in an inferno. There were no responders, no police, no firemen, nobody. I guess I should be thankful, as they may have found the state of the subject to be somewhat uncanny. They would have applied some type of moral fortitude done by those hypocrites who slam the moral hammer yet seclude it in a private moment. Those who watch me, the establishment, they must have done this. They destroyed my work. It has to be them. On the morrow, I will investigate this site during daylight. It is impossible to determine anything at this point. July 26, 2010. With the help of a trusted investigator, it has been determined that it was arson. He asked me if I wanted to submit a police report. At first, I was hesitant, immediately considering society's moral implications that would be brought upon my reputation. However, there wasn't a body, not a trace. I decided to file the report, as there is no proof the subject was in the building. It will then be investigated for arson, assuming those who watch me so intently do not sabotage the investigation. It is concerning, however, that there is no body. Perhaps those who burnt the building allowed him to escape. Some sort of rescue. What's clear is that I have no conclusion, be it with the arson, the perpetrators, or the test results. If the subject escaped, it is out there in the world, possibly dead but also possibly alive. It will just become that of another urban legend. It can join the ranks of the Mothman, the Jersey Devil, the Sasquatch, etc. It seems to avoid all creatures, and it will continue to do so. That on its own could bring interesting results in the future. How exhilarating. Having so many loose ends while being driven with such excitement and anticipation could drive a man with my integrity mad. Wouldn't you agree?